Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get started. So my last check for what was done was a little while ago, so now I have to go refresh and see if what was in the lead is still in the lead.
Bet you can't make new accounts.
So can I get people's attention, please? Professors get less and less scary as you become upperclassmen and or graduate students, am I right? What is it that I need to do to instill fear on a classroom of students? I think I just bring a whip to class. I just set it next to me and let it do all the talking. The sign outside only says no firearms.
What I'm seeing is.
So, all right, now I actually get people's attention. Even talking about the whip didn't. So first thing I'd like people to do is take a pass through the current situation. So go to Canvas, take a look at the discussion from yesterday. And now the purpose, instead of trying to figure out the games that you like, now ask the psychological question, why are the games that got the most likes popular? Why are the games that got the fewest likes less popular? Try to come up with a generic understanding of why people were drawn to the game ideas that they were. Yeah.
I like that.
Evan like. And that wasn't the one that was in the league last I checked. We're taking just a few minutes to look over all of these submissions and trying to figure out why the ones that were popular were as popular as they were. Yeah, it looks like our leader now has 12 likes. And a 12 and an 11.
The ambience and I thought.
Yep. So trying to figure out why. What do those that are popular, that receive likes, what do they have in common? Those that did not receive too many likes, what do they have in common?
I wish it was.
And feel free, as you start to get some ideas about that, feel free to start raising your hand. We can start that discussion while people are still perusing. And we can start trying to figure that out. First page. Yeah,
I think. Well, I only saw like two that like one was like 11 marks, the other was 12, but I think that they're really.
Yeah. Unique ideas. I also find that anything that is atmospheric, it helps that atmospheric was one of something that creates an atmosphere that is intriguing. You can already sense from the setting and the world design that this is different. This is. Yeah, so something that is unique, that hasn't been done before. That's a good point. So if you're brainstorming some game ideas, rather than using and basing this off of something that was already popular, finding some new ground, even if there are some similar mechanics or some similar ideas to something that has been done, finding something unique. What else do we notice? Any other patterns?
On the highway, it's like it's a new twist on like an old game, so I think people are familiar with it, but also like it hasn't been original stuff as well. It's
Right.
the beer brewing with civilization.
That was a really interesting one, wasn't it?
I would like to be.
Yeah, I thought that was a really intriguing direction to take that too. I'll start by just saying a lot of these ideas were really cool. Reading through these, at least half of them, I thought if this were implemented as a game, I would play that and I would probably really enjoy it. So overall, very well done, coming up with some intriguing ideas. Other patterns we noticed? Yeah,
I noticed that I was drawn to the ideas that made me laugh, like picturing it in my head.
yeah,
I think for the same reason, like I like games like Katamari Damacy, because it just gets kind of ridiculous. Are we allowed to say any games in here?
if you'd like, sure.
So like the one with John, like guns being afraid to be held.
Yeah, that was a ridiculous concept, but as soon as you see it, it's like, you know, there's some promise there. That's ridiculous, but it's ridiculous and playable. Yeah, that was a really good idea. And that appeals to people, right? You think about a movie about that, and that would be the world's worst B movie. No one would want to watch that movie, but you think about it as a game and suddenly it's playable or it's intriguing. It's something that you want to be in charge of the decisions surrounding guns that want to run away from you. Yeah, great idea. Anyone else notice anything? I can say some of my thoughts if this runs dry.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so we're trying to figure out why in Canvas, why did the game ideas that got likes, why were they popular? Those that got more likes, why were they more popular? Those that failed to get likes, why were they less popular? And how does that inform the ideas that we might generate when we try to brainstorm an idea for a game to make? What can we learn from the game ideas that people are in this class are most intrigued by?
I think subconsciously I like kind of break it down stuff that had this spelling in it.
Yeah,
Or it wasn't like a full sentence structure, but that was not really, it wasn't defined in the argument, but when you compared them to other submissions, it made them, less readable.
it's less readable, but also from my perspective, I catch myself with the same bias. If someone doesn't put the level of effort into making their post coherent, will they put that level of effort into making their game coherent? Is there a correlation between effort in those metrics? I am less inclined to want to play a game from a developer that does not think about their communication. And if their communication is not professional, I have a harder time seeing their game as professional. Yeah.
Also, that makes me think of the thousands, like one of the roles I had was martial arts and fighting. If they were immediately connected, I actually re-rolled that because I thought, well, what do I do with that? But I noticed a lot of folks did an interesting twist on two words that were otherwise related. And that's, for example, like Toby Fox Undertale. He had an interesting twist in that game, where you don't actually have to, well, I don't want to say any spoilers, but he had an interesting twist in that game. And I think that can make for.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of design space. If you get two words that naturally go together, the challenge is not finding a game. The challenge is finding something that is new or interesting, a twist, something different. Other thoughts? Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of liked and picked anything that was like funny and unique, because I don't know, like, we've been playing like the Stanley Parable recently, and that's really funny, and I'm getting a kick out of that, so. Anything that was like, it's like unique and I thought would be funny, would give me some laughs.
Yeah.
I played it, and it's kind of what I was, for, and then just uniqueness in general. I haven't seen before.
If you can imagine game design on some number of axes that we can't visualize because it's way more than 3. Imagine thinking about something like a K nearest neighbors approach to what are the games that are closest to this idea in this space, or maximizing the distance between your idea and any other game in that space. That would be how to think about or how to design something that is unique. Let me bias you, I think of everything mathematically. Any other ideas before I share some of mine? Who would say that they read every single one of these and gave them all the same level of critical thought before deciding the 5 that they liked? Raise your hand if you feel like you did that and didn't have too much bias in your process.
I did, but that was only because like I got in pretty early when there wasn't that much to read.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
I do think that like I kind of like didn't pay that much attention to the ones that were just like one sentence. Cause it's kind of like, you can't really describe like a full idea for a game. In that
Okay,
short time. You need like at least a paragraph, in my
Yeah.
opinion, to actually fully.
that's good bias though, right? It's the opposite of a too long didn't read. This is a too short didn't read. There's no way that you could describe something that I could possibly be intrigued by in a single sentence. It's either so vague that I don't know what this game would feel like to play. I can't get a sense of what that would be, or it's just so generic that it doesn't stand out. Any other biases that you caught yourself doing as you peruse these? Yeah.
Just if it was a genre or type of game I'm not very interested in, like if I saw puzzle, I was like, skip.
Okay, yeah, some genre where it doesn't matter how good the game is, it could be a world-renowned game of a particular genre, and I'm just not interested in that. Doesn't matter what else you have to say. Interesting. What else? Yeah,
I found myself also really biased with the concepts and ideas that were in the game.
Mhm.
Stuff that was like a little bit too tame, I found myself, I don't like that as much, even though some really simple tame ideas are really good games that I like Minecraft. It's a block world and can move the blocks.
that's true. Interesting idea, yeah.
Some of the games which introduce themselves as their different game and immediately stop.
Yeah, like this, but only some small change. Yeah, we already know how fun that game is. It exists. I don't necessarily want to play your indie version of it. I'm just gonna go play the fleshed out version that exists. Yeah.
Any climbing platformer, like, I just for me personally, would be incredibly frustrating.
Yeah, there are genres that we like more than others as any particular game. What was the most, we talked about the most universally liked ideas being something that was unique, something that was different, something that was atmospheric, something that was different from what we have played before, created something that was new. We talked about the ones that were less liked, either being too vague or too specific on something that already exists and didn't change itself, didn't distance itself from that idea. Other things I noticed a little bit were that those that gained traction initially gained more traction as time passed. So one of those possible biases is you see this game doesn't have any likes. Am I likely to like it if no one else has liked it? Whereas your eyes fall on, oh, this is the game that has the most likes that I've seen so far. I'm gonna read that one in more detail because other people have liked it. And that's kind of how, if your game gains traction, more people are talking about it, people are drawn to games without knowing more about it, aside from it's popular or it has traction right now. So traction begets more traction within games. I think that's probably the level of depth that I want to go into about it. We can continue to look at this and think about it throughout the quarter, but This exercise was mainly meant to really think about when you're thinking of game ideas, how do you go about that? How do you think about commercial success through the lens of behavioral psychology, through the lens of what you want to produce something that people are going to be interested in, want to play, and gain some initial traction from. So I'm hoping that embedded in this, there's a little bit of information about that for you to analyze at that level as it helps you to pick in the second part of this course, some game that you want to make. Again, you're not designing this game for yourself. You want it to gain traction with everybody else in this class, because I am not grading your games. You all are grading each other's games. You're making this for the general public, not for that biased professor that nobody likes. So this might be something interesting to come back to as we start thinking about the games we're going to make. Questions about where we are before we dive into a little bit of new material? All right. On, turned everything on, right? Plug everything in before the class starts. Oh, come on. It was on lecture, now it's on HDMI, and now it's not registering. We are going to turn it off and on again. Yeah, turn it off and turn it back on again. Sorry, Leo. It looks weird. Let there be light. Woo. Excellent. Okay. This next very short lecture, maybe we'll be able to get through it today, is talking about why people design games and why people play games. So thinking about this both from why do designers design, why do players play, what kind of reasoning do we have, what motivations do we have for getting into this, and how should we think about that? So we'll start with some designer-centric goals. What are designers trying to get out of designing games?
Money.
Money is you can make literally hundreds of dollars in the game industry, literally. I'm actually going to spend a little bit of time trying to convince you not to go into game design as a full-time field, because in computer science, this is probably the way to make the least money. With the skills that you have, this is going to minimize the return that you get. In general, any entertainment job is going to pay less for the same work. And if you do design games, you're only familiar with the ones that were commercially successful. So there's an inherent bias when you go to look at the games that are suggested, the games that exist. They're just the games that have gained traction. We don't really have a sense of or see the scale of all of the games that have been designed that weren't commercially successful. All of the time and effort that went into creating that didn't lead to the developer actually making too much money off of that. So for every Minecraft or Flappy Bird, there are actually tens of thousands of failed projects that do not generate much or any revenue at all. You can still make a decent living. And this is a little bit outdated at this point. I should probably come back and get this. I think this is actually about 1.5 times higher. The average computer science graduate right now is making about 75,000 right out of college, I believe is the target. That's the average right after you graduate. So in game design, we can look at I think we can even go to computerscience.org/careers, will have updated values of these numbers. And you can start to see, based on the different career type that you're going into, what can you expect to make on average coming out of a four-year institution. Games are always at or toward the bottom of this list because unfortunately, there are just better ways to make money. So if your goal with this degree is to make money, games is a hobby. Don't think of games as your future career. Other reasons we might make games. The way to get known by the community or not. How many game designers do you know out there by name?
I mean, a couple of the developers from Bungie are pretty popular.
Yeah, you might know of those games that you are very familiar with or companies you are very familiar with, you might know some names. Yeah,
By and large, like most people would know somebody like on the level of like Hideo Kojima, like people that made
Yeah.
games that are considered like legendary, that everybody knows of regardless of whether they played them or not.
Toby Fox.
mm-hmm. So
Miyamoto.
those names that you do know have been designing games for probably as long as you've been alive. In general, games are known as the game and less for the people who are behind the game. Which is unfortunate, yeah.
Or even like the studio.
Yeah, you get known as the studio that produced that, and there's so much turnover in those studios that just because the same studio made a couple of games doesn't necessarily mean that there was a significant overlap in who was responsible for the design and development of those games, yeah.
I'd argue that with the indie scene, people are getting more familiar with individual devs since the
Yeah, yep, that is the next point that I wanted to make, is you can look at something like Concerned Ape and Stardew Valley. You know the name because they've been working on that game for a very long time and is known for producing something that is the best game in the genre as a single developer, which is very impressive. So the general takeaway here is that games are more famous than designers, which unfortunately fame is not great. The community of game design is probably one of the best draws of the career itself. People who make games make them because they enjoy making them. If you've been making games for a long period of time, you're continuing to do this because you enjoy it, which means that you enjoy talking about it. So it is an actually excellent social avenue for talking about technology, talking about digital art. The industry is actually quite small. The number of people who are out there actually actively developing big name games, and there aren't that many people. The communities themselves are small compared to other sizes of other communities. So you get to know each other. As well, the community is quite welcoming. If you are learning how to do something and releasing your first game, you're not going to get a bunch of troll designers who come in and shit on your game because they don't like it. You're going to get a lot of constructive feedback because they were in your shoes a while ago. They remember what it is like, and in general, the community is quite welcoming. The indie game scene, if you make good games, you are respected. If you don't make good games, you're probably not known.
Depends how bad your game is, 'cause you can also get known for that too.
You're probably known for how you treat your customers more so than the bad design itself. If you design an adequate game and then are a jerk to your player base, you're probably famous for that reason. Personal expression is one of my favorite reasons that people go into games, because you want to make some kind of statement through your game. And of course, you can make a statement through film, you can make a statement through literature, but game-based statements are incredibly powerful if done well, and can really get across concepts that are difficult to capture in other media. To go through whether a game is the correct medium for your expressive idea, you can think of just what are the different options. What are you adept at using? If you're more adept at creating a game than you are at creating a film or acting, then, so of course, there's a growing audience for personal expression. We'll talk about a couple of examples of this toward the end of, I think it's this slide deck, where we really can see how personal expression can shape people's understanding of complicated topics. I saw this in one of the game ideas that someone in here created when they were talking about the idea of teaching sex ed through the use of a game. I thought that was incredibly clever. And the use of that is just, it's something that has not caught traction in a game setting. And I was thinking about this, and a game setting would be a really interesting way to interface with that. You could target it to very different age levels, even within the same game, as a way of, then you're not awkwardly in a school setting where you're talking about this in front of your peers. You have a hard time asking questions because of the fear of being judged by your peers. You're not talking to your parents about this if you feel like your parents can't be trusted about that. You're actually getting the experience through the use of an interactive medium. So I thought that idea was genius. The greater good, it could also be relevant to what I was just talking about, but people can make games because they want to make the world a better place. So we can call serious games part of that. So the most general term, but of course, the goal of any game, hopefully, is to still be fun as well as informative for the greater good, but you can still focus on the fun while still having a focus on either learning, teaching people about your experience. There was another game posted that mentioned in that game that it was based on their personal experience growing up. And I thought that that is also a very, if you want to share that experience and get other people to understand what it was like to be me or to go through the challenges that I have gone through, that's difficult for people to do, to put yourselves really in someone else's shoes. You can listen to them tell stories, but that's not the same as actually being there, interacting as that person and making decisions and seeing the consequences of those decisions. So there's a real place for designing games to help people understand each other's perspective. Part of this, my own research, is in gamification, either educational games, games that are meant to teach you something, or abstracting from that, games that are meant to motivate you to put forth your best effort. Those who put forth their best effort learn more than those who do not. So just give them an additional reason to put forth their best effort. There's some tie between the effort you put forth and the progress you make in some game that you play. There are also games for social change. So you can think of this as political change, social change, anything that you might want to portray through the use of game media. So political or social topics, very useful to at least describe a particular worldview on some topic. Behavioral change, you can play games to change things about yourself. So behavior outside of the game. There are exercise apps, nutrition apps, any gamification type app that's meant to make some change. So for instance, in my own development, my own gamification development, I am working to give people additional power in games as they submit assignments, not at the very last minute. Can I, through the use of having you play a game outside of class, teach you to avoid procrastinating? It's an intriguing idea. Yeah, right.
Very stubborn in that thing.
But there are also exercise apps. What was popular while I was researching this was something like Zombies Run. Has anyone played Zombies Run or even heard of it?
Yeah, heard that.
Yeah, heard of it? Yeah, that was one of the first games that gained traction on that level. And I think there's a huge opportunity in exercise and nutrition apps that has just not been developed to the level of engagement that could exist. If I were going to monetize a game idea in the near future, I would look at a game for some kind of behavioral change. That is a huge untapped market that you could design something that is really good there.
Could it could you argue playing some sort of an intentionally hard game, intentionally playing it harder to try to control and manage frustration and an anger would be used for that as well as a behavioral change?
Yeah, absolutely. That seems like it would be challenging to implement in a way that you could be legally responsible for how this person acts if for some reason that makes them worse. And especially if that leads to any household violence or external violence, you would be opening yourself up to a lot of legality that I don't think you want to be in as you design that. So it absolutely could exist. I would just urge you to be very careful about that.
And how does FromSoft get away with it?
They go from
Large legal
entertainment
teams. So you may want to design games because you want to become better at designing games. And the best way to do this is not to sit in a class and listen to someone lecture about it, but it's actually to go make those games. So that's why there's certainly a part 2 to this. As we are learning how to do it, I want to transition as quickly as possible to going and getting experience making games so that you can learn from the mistakes that you make. When we do go make these games, you're going to be releasing those games to the rest of the class. You will have assignments for random games to play. You will not know who developed them. But your job is to review them. Your name will get stripped from those reviews and passed back to the original developers so they can learn the different play experiences that people had with that. With that information, you can then try again, produce something else that hopefully is an improvement based on the feedback that you get. So we will be getting to this point, but the absolute best way to do this is to go practice. If you have past experience with Unity or some other game engine, my recommendation is find a game jam group and go make something between now and when the next course starts. See if you can join, practice, just engage with this in as much capacity as you have the time and space for being a busy college student. Every time you make a game, even if it sucks, it will improve your skills, it'll improve the next game that you make. Don't worry about trying to make the world's best game the first time you make a game. You also don't even know if the concept is going to be good until you implement it. I think a lot of the games that were popular that we just looked at, game ideas, when we developed them, would turn out to be not so great. A lot of the less popular ideas, once we developed them, would turn out to be some of the best ideas that we had. We don't really know just looking at the idea until it becomes something that we can interact with. Transitioning from designers to players. Players just want to have fun. It's usually the primary motivator for a game, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the only goal. Holding someone's attention is one of the best ways to keep someone playing your game. You first need to convince them to give it a try. Once they've given it a try, you want them to come back to your game over and over and over until either they beat it, or if it's a live service, that they have a reason to continue to come back and play it, especially if that leads to revenue. So some aspects that can make a game fun, we're going to break this down into enjoyable. How much dopamine is firing as you are playing this? Engaging. How much of it of your attention is it actually holding? And fulfilling. Once you stop playing the game, do you go back and think about your play session? Does it continue to have an effect on you? Does that dopamine continue to fire? Do you continue to think about the game long after you've played it? Or when you're not playing the game, is it dead to you? So thinking about it from all three of those axes, you can start to think about designing games and mechanics to make them enjoyable, engaging, and fulfilling. Thinking about them, what are the differences between those? How would you target each one of those with some mechanics or with some ideas? Does anyone have any ideas about that? What kinds of mechanics, what kinds of ideas could you use to target any of these three ideas? Yeah.
As controversial as it is, difficulty is a really good aspect of fulfilling.
Yeah, to say, I overcame this. You remember the most difficult gaming moment that you overcame. I'm pretty sure if I asked just about anybody here, they could fairly quickly come up with what that was, where that happened, when that happened. Yeah,
Reward cycles.
yeah, some kind of reward cycle. What is that target?
Fulfilling and probably enjoyable. Oh, and also engaging. I think it kind of hits all three, depending on how you look at it.
I would argue it mostly targets enjoyable. I love farming for something. I love watching number go up. I enjoy working toward a reward for a long time and getting that reward. Once you have the reward, it's actually about the process more so than the end result, which makes it really interesting to think about what was enjoyable was the process. Once you get there, maybe you remember, I got a platinum trophy on this particular game, and that is memorable because not very many people do that. So that could be how it targets something like fulfilling. Additional thoughts?
That's me.
This one has some things to say.
Yeah,
I really like when the games are not like taking control from me, like in cutscenes.
okay,
I like one of my favorite games is Half-Life. It's just, I think it's about to me, like it's just beginning. You just get through the whole game without like losing control over the character.
yeah, okay, interesting. So it becomes less engaging, you're saying, if you're in control of a character and then you're watching a movie, and then in your control of a character, you're being chugged back and forth between what is really two different mediums and having to reset your experience as you do that. Yeah. One, two.
To give a little bit of a kind of wording to Sergey's comment, and it's really engaging and fun to see really good cutscene and then transition to that gameplay, and you can do what they did in the cutscene in game.
Yeah,
It's so satisfying to know I can pull off that cool stuff myself if I
right.
give it a try.
But when there's a big difference between what your character is capable of in the game world and what they're capable of in a cutscene, that creates a little bit of disassociation between that can feel really. Yeah, it's not engaging. It feels like you're doing two different things. Yeah.
Yeah, so normally I would agree with what he says, but like, if it's done really well, sometimes it's just like an incredible experience. Like, I was never a big fan of like the OG series of God of War, but the new ones are straight up just like there are no camera cuts ever in the entire game. You go straight from gameplay into movie sequences, back to gameplay, and every moment of it is just totally engaging. And like, I that game never ever lost my attention. It was just done so phenomenally well. So like even losing control of like your main character as you're playing, it's just like, ooh, okay, what's gonna happen next? I'm like, all right, here we go, cutscene time.
Yeah, and it's in the same, especially if it's from the same perspective, if that cutscene is happening in the game engine. That especially can lead to and feel like, oh, I could have done that.
Yeah, the smooth transition makes
Yeah.
a huge difference versus like hard cuts into cutscenes.
Right. So even small decisions like that can make very big changes to each of these. Yeah.
I was gonna say, I think that quests can also, depending on the quest, fulfill all three of those.
Yeah.
If it's just like farm 10 mobs, that's not like very engaging in my opinion, but it's like killing like a boss.
Quest design is really important.
Yeah, killing a boss can like, make it worth it.
Yeah.
So for me, there is this game series that I find very engaging called the Dark Pictures Anthology. It's kind of like a choose your own adventure in a way, but you're like making choices for every character as you go along, and you could end up killing everyone by the end of the game. So you really gotta, be like, is this a smart decision? Or like, man, should I go with what I think this character would do, or should I just,
Yeah, that is very engaging, and players will play games for different reasons. A lot of them will play because they want to be that engaged, either in terms of I want to think puzzle, I want to think action, I want to not think and relax. There's so many different types of games that you could make, making sure that you're making something that is enjoyable, engaging, and fulfilling for the target audience may look completely different. If someone who wants to sit back and relax has to make difficult decisions on the fly all the time, after a long day of work, that's not enjoyable, engaging, or fulfilling. At the same time, you've just had a nice 5 espresso shots, you're ready to go, it's a weekend, you have nothing planned, you wanna sit down, now you wanna be engaged. So thinking about how your target audience fits into this is also a really big question to ask as a developer. And I think we can all pull on our past experience as game players to realize who we're trying to target with what we're trying to make. Great ideas across the board. Great ties. So continuing, let's dive into each of these in a little bit more detail. So enjoyment, most players what they seek. Some different types of play. We have competitive, chance-based, vertiginous. It gives you vertigo, and mimicry. So lots of different ways that we can now engage with a game. Engage with other people, engage with a random number generator, engage with a sense of thrill, or engage in some kind of similar to real life simulation that you now have more control of than you would in real life. Anything missing from that definition? Or just these, what else might there be?
Relaxing.
Yeah, just, it's something that is kind of relaxing.
Be cooperative there.
Yeah,
Or team based.
yeah, social, cooperative.
There's a lot of like new games, tag cozy.
Yeah,
Pretty.
yeah, cozy games. Yeah, I think there's certainly something to be said that games have evolved a little bit past this definition, and that there's more to it than that.
There's chance based, but we're not like choice based, where. Like
Choices matter, yeah,
Like visual novel, for example.
okay. I would argue maybe that goes into something like a simulation. It's a life simulation of someone who is not you.
Okay.
If there's a particular protagonist, or a societal simulation, if it's in a situation that is. So I feel like it could be placed in there, but it's kind of a loose placing. Maybe it deserves its own category.
Okay.
I mean, on that vein, chess is just a simulation of the strategy of like running a kingdom.
It's a very abstract. I'm gonna come back to that later and talk about levels of abstraction at some point. But so engaging. Has to grab and hold people's attention. So the decision to begin playing and the decision to continue playing, those are the two big parts that you have control over as a developer. They have to be in the player's hands. You can't, as a developer, force someone to give your game a try. Put the laptop in front of them, grab them by the collar and say, you're not moving until you play my game. They have to opt into it. Once participation isn't voluntary, the experience is no longer a game, right? Part of what is a game is that we opt into playing it. Ways to grab attention for the first time. A lot of it is aesthetic. So visual beauty, visual aesthetic, sound aesthetic. If on the loading screen, a very nice piece of music starts playing, that grabs your attention. Once your attention is on something, yes, it becomes easier to continue with that. What are different ways to break from something that is immersive? So you start playing a game, you're very drawn into it, it has that hook. What are reasons that might peter out and no longer be engaging? Yeah.
If like a character or something in the story breaks the rules that it is already established earlier.
Okay, yeah, something like that, where there's a contradiction in the story or the setting. Yeah.
It's buggy and crashes a lot.
Yes, I hate games that crash every single time, even if it's a minor inconvenience.
Server desync.
Yep.
It's really jarring in like a harder multiplayer. I'm calling out Valheim right now.
Yeah.
When I made it all the way into this late game area. And I'm new and trying to run back to get my gear after I died due to my own poor decisions.
Mhm.
And then I get killed by an enemy that's smacking me while I'm desynced and have no agency or ability to avoid that.
Networking code is kind of important. Is there an idea back there too?
When a game has like a story and then at some point. There's something that you want to do that obviously makes like since, but the game doesn't let you do it, like the designer just
Okay.
never bothered to enter that, and you're like. Why can I not, this is an obvious solution that this character would
Yeah.
almost certainly think of, why can't I just do this?
So it breaks the concept of an avatar where you feel like you want to be able to control, that you're in control of this character's decisions, but it's only a limited number of decisions that the designer has allowed you to make. Yeah, when you feel that lack of freedom, yeah,
For me, when the tutorial's too long.
yeah. If it's holding your hand for too long or the tutorial dungeon just doesn't end and you want to start to experience that freedom. All right, I understand the mechanics. Now let me loose in this game world. Yeah.
It's a competitive game, there's hackers.
Yeah, a competitive game, if it's not fair to the competition, I'm gonna call out balance as a huge part of this. There can be difficulty spikes. If something is too difficult for where you are at that point, you will get frustrated trying it over and over and over again, unless you're the kind of person who says, I don't care if it takes me 1,000 times, I'm gonna get past this. If you don't have that level of competitive spirit, I personally don't. I want the game to respect my time. So there's an appropriate level of difficulty. I'm not playing this to be defeated. I'm playing it to enjoy defeating it. Yeah,
Well, I want to talk about a specific experience I had with some of these. So I was playing Cyberpunk 2077, and it was, I was trying to do a mission, couldn't quite figure it out, was like, figuring I needed to raise one of my skills that it, for a skill check and those things. So I go out, specifically avoid that mission, trying to raise that skill, go back, and now it says in order to perform that skill, I need a, like, instead of a level 7 in that skill, it's now a level 10. Like,
that doesn't really make sense with the story, right? Or the atmosphere. Why would the difficulty of that have changed based on what you have done? Yeah, it's immersion breaking.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that can be generalized into this concept of immersion breaking that has quite a few facets to it. You break the immersion, the player realizes I'm playing a game. You have a very bad difficulty spike or a change in balance, or maybe the entire game just feels too easy or too difficult. It wasn't targeted toward my skill level and there's no difficulty that makes sense for it. Yeah. Puzzle design, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, then there are some puzzles that are designed that way that have a particular solution, but don't really lead you along the path to that solution. Or the rules as they are stated don't lead to the exact rules of the puzzle. So you have to play around and discover differences between what was told to you and what actually is. Yeah.
I was playing Far Cry 5, and there's a section of the game where over the course of like a couple hours, one of the enemies basically kidnaps you and makes you run through this like same exact combat arena. Like I think it's 4 times in a row, and every time it's the exact same. And then, but then like the color changes at the end, and it goes from red to kind of like the steel color. And so just the way the story is setting it up, there's a lot of talk about how, okay, this guy is like mentally training people, and so like I realized, okay, the last time it runs through this, they're going to put one of my allies at the end, and it's gonna be like, oh, you run in and you shoot the allies because this is like, you're doing the rote memorization, and so like, okay, I figured it out, I'm not gonna do it. That happens, and I go into the last room, the ally is standing there, he goes, don't shoot, and I don't, and nothing happens. Like 2 minutes go by, the guy just stands there, it's not moving.
The game's dictating what you're supposed to
Yeah.
do there.
And then the game just restarts. I felt insulted. It felt like the game designer said, we think our players are so stupid, we're not even going to bother putting this in as a possibility. I legitimately felt so insulted that that's the point where I stopped playing that game.
I thought you were going the direction of repetition, which is something that I wanted to talk about as well. It's still very valid as a frustration.
It's also
but-
hilarious to hear that because in Far Cry 4, at the very beginning, you can end the game by just waiting in a spot. The NPC tells you, okay, wait here. If you wait like 14 minutes, you actually get rewarded and the game ends.
That's funny.
So it's hilarious to see that in the next game, they lost that awareness of players trying to understand what they're doing and making decisions
Yeah.
reasonably off of it.
What percentage of the developers do you think were the same across the two games? I have no idea, but it'd be intriguing to go look up. So, yeah, just thinking about all of the ways that games can frustrate, that engagement can be lost. I think repetition is something we didn't really talk about, but doing the same thing over and over and over again, especially if the difficulty doesn't change, if you're not adequately being rewarded for the time that you're putting in, can lead people to say, all right, I'm done with this repetition. I can't move forward. There are other games that will respect my time more. We'll come back tomorrow and continue the discussion. We have a little bit more to discuss here, but we will at the start of next week, I think, start in on looking at this imbalanced trading card game. So that's on the horizon. I have ordered trading cards for everyone. They're supposed to come in tomorrow. So we will actually be writing on trading cards and playing with real in-person trading cards as we try to figure out what is this imbalance. So a little bit more lecture. We'll get to that. We'll do that in a reasonably short term.